This evening's Dharma talk is titled Tibetan words to start with. Tomal Gyi Shepa. Tomal Gyi Shepa is Tibetan for ordinary mind. Ordinary, everyday mind. And it is a teaching that emphasizes the ordinary or present nature of awakening or realization or clear understanding. This is basically saying that you don't have to go to some mountaintop somewhere, you don't have to go to a distant place somewhere else to get nirvana, get realization. And you also don't have to get rid of samsara or get rid of your everyday difficulties in your everyday life so that you can live in some kind of special enlightened state. It's basically saying that what you're looking for is right in front of you, always has been. It's right in front of you. Difficult because we're full of hopes and fears and beliefs, disbeliefs, opinions, ideas, concepts, on and on. So this is why in our tradition in particular, but in other traditions in different ways, there's a practice of stretching or enhancing or strengthening the ordinary mind, which is to sit down, hold still, and actually just witness your mind. Conventionally, in everyday situations, when you're in the kitchen making coffee or doing dishes or doing laundry, going to the parking lot, getting in your car, arriving at work, and all the other mundane things that go on, we see that as something else, something other than. That's something else. That's just everyday things. And what we're looking for is some kind of special realization or experience that makes us feel like we've accomplished something. And I can say this much about any kind of experience, no matter how wonderful it is, goes away. Impermanent. Everything that arises goes away. So what you're looking at right now, the objects that are here, the people that are here, the incandescent lights or the fluorescent lights or whatever they may be, light coming through the window, will change. It'll be a different place, a different building. So there are fluctuations and changes going on. And we get entranced or mesmerized by all of the vacillations and things that are happening. But what doesn't change is the mind itself. And if one's through hope for something else and fear of something we don't want, hope for something we do want, grasping, aggression, passion aggression, or the other one, ignorance, shutting down, through those three we tend to avoid the very thing we are looking for, called awakening or realization. And if one sees this or understands this or is clear about this, they don't have doubts about it. They don't need to check in with someone else and say, I'm having this, what do you think? Is this something? Or as long as you need to check with somebody else, you have a lot of work to do. And that work might be more of just sitting here and looking at your mind come and go and come and go. So if anyone is trying to convince you of something or sell you on something or promote something to you, it's probably not Tomal Gyi Shepa or ordinary mind. It's probably some kind of, albeit subtle merchandise. Do this practice and you'll have this. Do this and you'll have that. You want to feel really good, feel better, feel more of this, more of that. Do this, do that. There isn't particularly anything being promised here. Usually if you find yourself in this particular room in front of this particular person, then you're probably, you could say, ready to hear this. And I can say it in 2 words, not separate. There isn't anything else. There isn't anything other. It's just this. This is why in Buddhist tradition, particularly in Tibetan tradition, but also in the Zen tradition, there's something called devotion, which is not belief in anything, or is it a disbelief in anything? It is an understanding that you may need some guidance, you may need someone to inspire you. And this isn't someone to worship, the teacher, but someone that you can give the benefit of the doubt to. This doesn't mean blind faith or trust or devotion in the sense of all of your thinking stops and you don't analyze anything, you don't evaluate anything, that you just blindly trust. I say don't trust anything. Don't believe anything I say. I say this quite often. I also say don't disbelieve anything I say. Can you find that? You find looking at anything and you're neither believing it, validating it, nor disbelieving it, devaluing it, or looking away. That's the third one. Don't accept it, don't reject it, don't look away. If you can do that as a practice, you'll find that what you are looking at is what you're looking for. It's not something else. It is one of the metaphors that's been used, it's your own face.
Is suffering ordinary?
Pretty much.
So when we have suffering arising, there's some sort of negativity, and what is it to see it as ordinary?
That it's not extra. You have nerve endings. We feel good, we feel bad. We're human beings, so we're going to have feelings come and go. It's when we struggle with that or we fight against something and we push and pull, then the suffering turns into a difficulty that is extra or too much, or there's too much going on, too much difficulty.
Can one practice having an ordinary mind?
We always practice having an ordinary mind.
How so?
We just don't see it. It's always this. There isn't anything else but what's happening right now with each person. Yes.
Is there a way to become reacquainted with that or recognizing it?
There is. Do the one thing you have some control over. What is that?
Hold still.
Say it again.
Hold still.
Can you paraphrase that?
Sit down.
Can you paraphrase that?
Look at your mind.
Can you paraphrase that?
Meditate.
What they said.
Smart ass.
The new guy.
Huh?
The new guy.
So I would say the other one is don't do anything unless you have to. You're sitting here, If you're doing something else, then I'm not saying you shouldn't go and eat if you're hungry, but don't do anything less. Don't do anything extra. This is one of the reasons we have, in our tradition, we have meditation retreats, where Chezan just came out of a 26-day solitary retreat where he's doing sitting meditation like you were doing a little while ago, 8 hours a day. Nothing particular to brag about. I would say don't do that unless you have to. Don't meditate unless you have to. So there's nothing, you're not going to find anyone here trying to spread some kind of propaganda or sales pitch about everyone should meditate. You shouldn't do anything unless you have to do it. Yes?
We create these forms have been created or passed down, and they appear very special in the fact that they're in a stark contrast to our day-to-day life. So what is the motivation between creating a special situation with the idea of seeing ordinary mind?
Very good. So the idea with creating a special situation is if you don't do that, then you're pulled here, pulled there. If someone says, do this, do that, help me with this. Let's go over here. What do you think about that? Let's build I've got this great idea for a chinchilla farm. Will you help me with that? And there goes the next 6 months of your life. Not that you shouldn't do that. Chinchillas are all right. But in order to, and it's not that it's wrong. The right and wrong, that's just extra, and that's just a lot of palaver. So right and wrong is extra. Palaver farm?
That's one of my favorite words.
Palaver? I think I used it once in the last 10 years. Well, maybe 8 years. So the idea is to sit down, hold still, and watch your mind in its fundamental, right where the thoughts and feelings and emotions and hopes and fears are starting up at, right where they start to ramp up at, right at the beginning. It's like looking at the seed of a tree. You're actually right down looking at the seed. It takes some time. The first 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years might be just spent looking at the tree. It might take you a while each person would be different, to actually begin to see down into the roots of what you've been creating around, with, and for your life, and including your friends, relatives, children, pets, friends, enemies, neighbors, students, teachers, on and on and on. And so to be able to drop down and see, that seems to take a lot of, the common word is the discipline. In other words, you sit down, you hold still, and you look. Or not, or get up and run around and continue to run into things. Overdose on this, underdose on that, yes.
Can we see the seed if it's already turned into a full-grown tree?
Absolutely. And relatively. How? Now, brown cow. Because it's always starting over again. It's always starting over. It's all starting over. All you have to do is drop down into it and watch it start to build itself. Build itself into your world and your hopes and fears, the things you want, the things you don't want. And your own conditioning coming and going and coming and going. Go ahead.
You often say nothing happens twice, so when you say it's starting over and starting over, is it the same thing that's starting over?
It's the same thing that's different. It's the same thing, it's the same modality, but it's different. Looks different. It's like every day we wake up, it's waking up. We get out of bed, but it's different each day. Some days are pretty good, some days are not so good, some days are kind of somewhere in between. We just keep going. Kind of, what are we doing this for, kind of thing. What is this about? What is life about, as they say, as we say? Sometimes if we have something to look forward to, some kind of pleasure, some kind of adventure, then we feel up. But we can't continually live out of some kind of, tomorrow's our vacation, going on vacation.
If I've already watered the seed and it's already added so much to it. How do I? It feels like it's too late to start find the seed.
Just don't water it. And you have to find it. You have to see it. And then you if you watch it for a while, it'll keep going. And then over time, this is the image metaphor I often use, is you'll notice how it's getting its fuel from somewhere. And it's usually probably other things happening, but it seems that it gets its fuel from you refusing it, trying to push it away. It gets fuel from that. Just like fighting with anyone will cause them to fight back. But not fighting with someone, people usually want to fight so bad, they'll start to accuse you of something. You know, why aren't you talking to me? Or you're just ignoring anything to get you to engage with them and fight. So just observe, and you'll see the way that it's getting its fuel from being agreed with, objected to, shut down on those three. Any kind of fiddling around and meddling with the mind tends to make it continue to spin. Shoto.
How can things that share modality appear differently?
How do you mean?
Earlier to Jinshu, you said same modality, it just appears differently. I'm wondering how that can be.
Well, you get up in the morning, you get up in the morning, you get up in the morning. You get up in the morning, you feel good. You get up in the morning, you feel bad. You get up in the morning, you feel neutral. It's just the nature of things. You're always waking up in the morning, but it could be just the causes and conditions that make up our mind and all of the things that we haven't looked at. Is that what you're asking about? Yeah. It's extremely complicated. And the best way to approach that complication is to find the one who's seeing that, who's witnessing that. That's why sitting meditation is so important. To sit down and find out who you are. Find out who this is that keeps agreeing with some things, objecting to other things, and ignoring. Yes?
The present is the nature of awakening. Where are we functioning that causes us not to see that?
It seems to be that it's just a whole matrix of imagination, imaginary things coming and going that are fueled by passion, aggression, ignorance, hope, and fear. We create a whole world of things that are pushing this way and pushing that way that we buy into. I need to do this, I need to do that. You'll notice if you walk from here to the parking lot, try to walk from here to the parking lot without thinking about anything. As soon as you leave here, immediately the mind gets filled with where you're going, what's happening, what you should have said to somebody, why did they look at you that way, I should have worn a belt, my pants keep falling down, stuff like that. The causes and conditions that are your life, every little incidental thing is showing up as some kind of activity inside or with the mind to object to agree with, to ignore. Is that what you're asking about? And it's not that you, don't misunderstand, it's not that you can walk from here to the parking lot without thinking. I'm not advocating that you should try to do that necessarily, but I'm saying if you try to do that, I'm not advocating that you can succeed at that. Probably not. But by looking at that, just watching your thoughts from here to there, helps you see. If you continue to watch your thoughts, whether you're sitting on the cushion, walking from here to the parking lot, you'll notice how completely full your mind is constantly jabbering about everything. It's just full of explanations, blaming oneself, blaming others, and just an endless a stream of ideas and thoughts, opinions, hopes, and fears. Yes.
Is there anything that wouldn't be considered part of ordinary mind?
No.
What?
So ordinary mind is a way of teaching it, because people are looking for something special. And what's being said is, this is it. You're looking at what you're looking for. Go ahead.
I was just wondering about in what way something can be part of ordinary mind and simultaneously seems to obscure our awareness of the ordinary mind, the ordinary quality.
So what's the question?
What is, how can something be simultaneously ordinary mind and something that obscures our understanding of that?
I don't know. What do you think? That's why I ask a question, right? So when I say I don't know, I'm saying I have an idea of what I could say about it, but I think it's best for you to look at what you're asking me and go into that yourself, penetrate that yourself, rather than just have it be you ask and I tell you something where you no longer have to look at that anymore. That's a very good thing to ask yourself, yes.
When you came up and had one of your interviews with me during my retreat, as you left, you said, Tomal Gyi Shepa, do you know what that means, ordinary mind? And there's something very frustrating about that, because there's almost an effort to try to be ordinary, an effort. I hear you, but I still feel like I'm crazy.
That's ordinary mind.
And that's ordinary mind, but it's also something I fixate on that causes me to fail to recognize the ordinary mind.
That's ordinary mind. There isn't anything but this. Any of those of you who have been listening to this person talk for the last number of years, hear me say it over and over again. There's just this. If you see what this is, you'll see that you're actually, in a sense, not exactly, you're not exactly looking at yourself, but you're looking at an aspect of yourself that you've been ignoring, and the way you ignore it is you think it's something else or it's other. This is happening all over the world. It's happening where people take people in foreign countries, or people with a different skin color, or people with a different religion, ethnicity, and think of them as someone else who's not as good, or something like that. Happens a lot. Yes?
What is the difference between suffering and being aware that you're suffering?
I think it would be different with each person, but to address your question specifically, I think that if you're aware that there's suffering, then there's some kind of the suffering comes up as an object, but there's some kind of a space around the suffering, and it's difficult for the suffering to continue in the same way with that kind of spaciousness around it. It's not being agreed with, it's not being objected to, it's not being ignored for sure. You're just aware that you go ahead.
So is words are coming out and I'm hearing them hit that and being like hope, it's our goal. I know those are not the word, but is the hope to be aware of suffering? There's always suffering, so is our endeavor to strengthen the awareness, not lose the suffering?
So there's no actual agenda to not lose the suffering. There is an agenda to see what is true, moment by moment, to see fundamentally what is the situation we find ourselves in. And also the Buddha's motivation for his path was to end suffering. This is why he taught 2,500 years ago, because he could see that people were suffering, and part of the reason they were suffering is because they wanted something else. Whatever they had, they didn't want that, they wanted something else. And of course, there are different versions of that, different ways of looking at it. Sometimes people are being tortured by someone else. This is just out and out pain. It's just the nature of the complicated nature of karma that causes some people to eventually get power over other people, and then those powerful people to suppress other people. It's just, it's pretty insane, because you're actually fighting against part of yourself. Go ahead.
So when you speak of ordinary mind, I think the image that comes to me is I go home, I go to bed, I get in my bed, and I go to sleep. Versus I go home, I go in my room, I notice that my husband is in bed, and I think someday he's not going to be there. And instead of just going home and going to bed and doing that kind of mindless routine,
What kind?
is mindless routine is the ordinary mind that you speak of, being aware of these ordinary moments as actually a present. The ordinary moments are extraordinary in their presentness.
Yes. It's exactly what you said, minus what you just said.
Perfect.
You follow that? It's exactly what you said, minus your commentary on it. And when you say presence, or I think that's what you said, that's one of the ways that ordinary mind is described as authentic presence. You're so present that there isn't anything else. You're so present, there are no extenuating circumstances in your mind about an imaginary future or irreconcilable past, or past and future are beside the point, because there's only this, there's just this, always. There's not even a clock ticking. This doesn't mean the body mind isn't going to drop, but if you think you're this, you're going to suffer. If you think you're limited to this breathing human form, it's going to be difficult. It's going to get more difficult when you approach your own death, because then you think you are going to die, or actually going to come to some kind of end. Yes?
Who dies with the body?
Body dies.
Does the idea that we are our body die with that?
I don't know. I haven't died yet, so I'm not sure. Why aren't you smiling? Are you thinking about something? What are you thinking about?
Another question.
Go ahead.
What is imagination that's present?
What is the imagination that's present? Imagination that's present, it knows it's imagination. It knows that what is being imagined is imaginary, instead of what is being imagined is somehow real and should be feared or hoped for.
If that's seeing what is known as real,
Just this.
how does just this save all beings?
With great difficulty, because all beings are resisting. They resist all the time. My intention, because I'm just this wonderful person who's really trying to help people. It's the only reason I'm still breathing. I'm trying to help people, okay? And so, you have a further question? Okay, so I'm trying to help people, but people act as if I'm trying to take over their mind or something, and they run away. That's why you have to put on a chain every night. What? There's something out there?
There's a chain in the north line, so there's that one.
I mean the one around the pole that goes around your leg, yes. No, I'm just saying that we not meddling with someone, we trying to work with someone where they're at. Sometimes they misunderstand and go another direction. They're not ready to have any kind of fundamental help. They want some kind of other thing, some kind of solution or some kind of answer.
Does our self-centeredness make it difficult to experience our ordinary mind?
Yes. I think there's a for one thing, there's an imputed or imagined self who can either be having fun or be entertained or be bored or be something. Or something can be there, be successful. So there's some kind of imaginary situation happening with who we think we are. And so that makes it difficult. We actually think we are somebody who can succeed or somebody who can fail. And it's not saying there isn't some kind of success and failure going on some level, but fundamentally there isn't. There's just this. And it's not separate.
So are the stories that we make up kind of barrier to ordinary mind?
Yes.
Ordinary mind doesn't tell stories.
No, it doesn't. Nothing else is happening but this. It's hot in here. And I'm wearing a bathrobe. Of course you are too. Yes.
You said ordinary or responding to the ordinary mind doesn't tell stories. Is that what
Yes.
you said? Is that which tells the stories the same stories as that the stories that are seen?
Say that again. Is that which tells the stories?
The same situation as the situation being seen.
Junju, would you answer that? Suzanne, would you like to answer that? Can you paraphrase what he just said? You can't really? You can't? You weren't listening to it? You're daydreaming, okay. Ask me again.
Is there a distinction between what looks like telling stories and the seeing of stories?
They're distinction. Like what looks like telling stories. Oh, you mean what looks like telling stories that's not telling stories, that is the actual storyteller that's telling the stories? That one?
Said that. Where that occurs.
Where that occurs? No.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Junju understands. Go ahead.
Drew from Florida has a question.
Yes.
He asks, what is the relationship between ordinary mind and Kensho?
So Kensho, or the traditional Japanese word for insight into your true nature, Kensho, means that you're going along and suddenly you have some kind of insight into the fundamental nature that nothing is actually happening and that there is no separation between you and anything else. And it's very experiential, and it shows up, and then it starts to crinkle or go away, mainly because we grasp at it, we want to keep it. So it could be very powerful insight, but since there's still remnants of a self-centeredness that really likes that insight, this is called the ego, it wants to hang on to that, even though the ego kind of backed up and kind of dozed off for a minute, and then the realization came, Kensho came, and one had this little mini awakening, which was maybe pretty powerful. But then the ego awakens and say, wait, I had that experience. I want that. I want to save that. Can I put it in a bag and save it and just take it out every now and then to make myself feel better? So, was it Drew? So Drew was asking, who's in Florida, was asking if what's the relationship between those two? One's extraordinary and the other's ordinary. And it's extraordinary because of such a contrast that you were dozing off and suddenly you have this Kensho experience, and then there's this big contrast. The ordinary or Tomal Gyi Shepa has no opposite. It's just this. And it's not that it's not an experience, because an experience, here's an experience. Now watch what happens to this experience. What's happening to it? Huh?
It's fading.
going away. All experience goes away. Tomal Gyi Shepa, ordinary mind doesn't go anywhere. Nothing happens to it. Yes?
Yeah, are Kensho and Satori the same thing, or is there a difference between those two terms?
My understanding is Satori is complete awakening from the Buddhist, Zen Buddhist perspective, and Kensho is a temporary insight into it. It's part of the path of leading towards Satori, Tatori, enlightenment.
Thank you.
Did I answer Drew's question? Is he happy with it?
Let's see.
Make it an easy one.
You often say that realization isn't an experience, but it's experiential.
Yes.
What's the experiences that make up that experiential quality?
Something like Kensho, or just a contrast between you were really tied up in knots over something and now you're not. No pun intended. So, awakening is not particularly an experience which can come and go, but it has experiential qualities to it that may show up. It depends on what's happening in the rest of your life. If you've been sitting looking at the wall for a long time, and you've been doing this for years, awakening could creep up on you, and you might not notice a big contrast. Other than you might just not notice. You might just notice that you don't take things all that seriously anymore, and you seem to be not at war with anything. So you might just kind of notice it gradually. The great Zen master who lived in California back in the 60s, Suzuki Roshi, has a book of his teachings called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And one of the images that he used was the path to awakening. This is different for everyone, but his description was, path to awakening is like walking in a fog. You start out where your robes are completely dry, but you walk and you walk and you walk, and by the time your walk is finished, your robes are soaking wet. So you don't really notice that happening. You just keep practicing and practicing and practicing. Just returning to this, as Katagiri Roshi said, who was a contemporary of Suzuki Roshi, returning to silence, returning to silence. You just return to silence. Sit down, hold still, return to silence. And that might be, for a while, might be returning to a lot of racket. Anybody who's beginning meditators sit down, hold still, find that their mind is going this way and that way and this way and that way. About this and about that, about this and about that. But over time, eventually all that starts to settle down. No guarantee. More than likely it will settle down. I gotta have some questions from somebody besides Shoto. Go ahead.
In thinking we haven't practiced enough, get in the way of our clear sight.
I could. It could, but if you think you're not practicing enough, then you have a teacher. Who is it? Ask me. Go ahead. You just ask me. Ask me again.
Like to read?
Yeah. Or you could ask for Yokodo. So yes, it could, but unlikely. I mean, if you're trying to practice and you're a meditator, you're serious, and you've been committed to this, doing this for years, then probably you're going to have times when you think, I need to practice more. So it's very common. But to someone who doesn't particularly engage with this, maybe this is more of an off and on thing. So it's up to them. Not everybody's meant to be doing this. It's difficult to do this kind of practice. You have to do a lot of it. So, and sometimes that's what's happening if you've been sitting and sitting and sitting, and then even though you've been sitting a lot, maybe for a few hours every day, you think, I need to sit more than that. There's probably some pretty good insight into that. That's why if you live in this place, well, if you're a temple resident, you live here, then you're scheduled to sit 6.5 hours every day. So this is not a hobby here. Not saying that people who sit an hour a week, that is a hobby. That may be just what their practice is. Maybe just as serious as someone else's, based on their life and their responsibilities, their children, their families, their job, or their ability to just hold still and look at the wall for a while. That's not easy to do. Have some time left. Any other questions? You can ask more questions. Yes.
You said of realization, you may just realize that you aren't taking things so seriously anymore. On the path, if we see that we're taking things too seriously, but we also see that we can't just stop doing that. How do we work with that?
That's awareness. That's a part of the path, is to see that you are not going to be able to control. I mean, if we can control ourselves, why wouldn't we just be happy? You wouldn't even be here. Nobody would be here. If we could just if you had control over your life, which you don't, we would just not do things that were bothersome and do things that we would just be happy all the time. But we can't. We're human beings, and it's difficult. And if you just watch the news for a couple hours, the extreme of suffering all over the world is just horrible. Even the people who aren't saying much, or not on the news, are living in, Kansas or in Maine or in, well, I was going to say Syria, but that wouldn't be too good of a place to be right now. But people are having their difficulty, their struggle with each other. People have resentments against family members, their brothers. They having trouble with their brother. It's just an incredibly complex and difficult situation. And according to the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, it seems to be necessary if you want to really deal with this head on, not just find a way to escape or to blot it out or not think about it. Then it seems to be necessary to sit down and train your mind. Finally, don't take anything for granted anymore. Don't believe anything. Don't disbelieve anything. Don't look away. Buddhism is not a belief system. If people that don't know anything about Buddhism think people worship stuff, who's worshiping anything, it's just a reference point. It has nothing to do with believing anything, nor disbelieving. What more?
I guess it seems like my tendency is to go the opposite direction and just take it seriously and then
Yes.
fluctuate and try to push that away. How do I not do anything with that?
Well, the first step is to see how much you do with it without interfering. Because if there's a subtle pushing it down, it's going to keep coming up until you get the lesson number 2.6, which is don't fight with anything. And you may have to fight and lose and fight and lose and fight and lose until you see that you can't fight with that. You can't fight with those negative feelings that arise. People who fight with negative feelings either deliberately fighting or through blaming others for their negative feelings, which is another way of enhancing the negative feelings, or trying to do some artificial ignorance called Pabst Blue Ribbon. Don't drink that, it'll probably kill you. But drugs or chemicals, some kind of artificial shutting down of things. In your situation, the downside is you're actually experiencing the negativity and you're pushing on it, and it keeps coming up and it pushes, and it's frustrating. So the downside is how difficult it is. The upside of it is you're actually looking at it. You're actually looking at the very issue that might have been a problem for the last 3 lifetimes. We don't know. And as you know, I say it, not that I believe in past lives, but we don't know how far back that goes or what form that takes in an apparent past. How much did you meditate today? How many hours? 3 hours you sat today. And that's a fairly common for you to sit 3 hours a day. Maybe not every day, but fairly common. So you've been doing that for 2 years, close to 2 years. Keep going. Most people aren't going to do that. Most people are going to meditate for a half an hour every 3 days or 20 minutes a day or something, which is fine, and they should do it. But it seems to take a lot of sitting practice to be able to break into this situation. Talk to me in 20 years.
You still be alright?
Huh?
Will you still be alright?
I'm not promising anything. You think this is hard for you? It's gotta be me. So what I would say is time is somewhat irrelevant. It's relevant, but it's somewhat irrelevant. What's important is moment by moment, sit down, hold still, watch what moves. And eventually you begin to see the way in which you, and this is painful for an individual to see the way in which you, and I'm not accusing anyone, because you'll do all the accusing yourself. You'll see the way in which you keep making things difficult for yourself by fighting with them. Please don't do this. Drop one fist. When you look deep into your consciousness, you'll see there's a war going on of some kind. And when I say, you can't stop the war because that's going to war with war, but you could look at the war and see that there's two sides to that war. I like it, I don't like it. It's good, it's bad. I should, I shouldn't. And just drop one of those. And then this will go on for a little while longer, but not a lot longer because it needs some opposition to even be there. Otherwise, it's just, might as well be just fanning the breeze, like you're doing. Further questions? Yes.
Drew responded to whether or not he liked your answer.
Yeah.
The relationship between Kensho. He said the answer was insightful. Thank you.
David.
Is there a relationship between ordinary objects or ordinary activities and ordinary mind?
Yes. It's not, there's not a relationship between them so much. They're the same thing. It's just ordinary. And it's not ordinary just in the object is ordinary. It's everything is ordinary. Everything in the room, everything moving, everything leaving, everything holding up, everything here is ordinary. Yes.
And how is all that ordinary into sanity?
No more warfare. Insanity is fighting with yourself over everything, and either fighting with yourself inside or fighting with yourself that you projected on others, like blaming others, even though someone has actually done something, hurt you. Don't blame. I mean, you can't help but do something there. You at least maybe get out of their way. But the causes and conditions that arose for them to cause them to be after you or hurting you are also unsearchable. You can't find the original cause for any kind of situation. Yes?
Is getting out of the way ordinary?
Yes. Once ordinary mind, there isn't anything separate from it. You can't say, oh, that's ordinary mind, this other stuff. Nah, that's special.
So is there an extraordinary mind?
I haven't seen one yet. Is that your question, or?
No, that's mine. We're talking about ordinary mind.
What do you
Is there an opposite to ordinary mind then?
Well, that's a good question. Is there an opposite to it? And I would say the opposite to it would be the fluctuation and the thinking there's something else that we need to have, and thinking there's something hidden when it's just this. And it's just ordinary. It's not special.
Things that look extra, as this do.
Yes.
When do those?
When part is extra. It's right now. That's why I'm interrupting you. It's when you say when, it's right now. You're looking at it. You're seeing it, hearing it, smelling it, tasting it, touching it, thinking it. It's this right here. Including any kind of negativity or difficulty that's coming up for you. Don't accept, don't reject, don't look away. Do nothing with it. You're warm. Some.
Squirrel.
You're a squirrel. Like a squirrel. Yeah. Yes.
Can we ask a question without stepping away from this list?
Sure. Go ahead. Sokuzan, can I ask a question without stepping away? You just did? Well, so I'm not deliberately trying to be evasive, endeavoring to respond to your questions. How about your little friend behind you there? Does he have any questions? Yes, you.
What is stepping away?
What's it look like to you? No. That's why you ask. Probably the simplest way to respond is to shift to something else. Instead of being with whatever's happening when it feels raw, rugged, irritating, intense, is to try to find something else to replace that, step away from it. Another way of saying it is to refuse your life. Don't miss your life. Whatever is showing up for you when you wake up tomorrow morning, whatever that is, don't embrace it. I'm not saying that. Don't reject it. Don't look away from it. Whatever it is, it's just that. To do anything else with it, to dream up things about it, to analyze it, to interpret it, to elaborate on it, to blame anyone for it, to credit anyone for it, to do anything with it at all is to avoid what it fundamentally is, which is what? Not separate. Thank you. We have a final question before we close. We can all go jump in the refrigerator. Yes.
When we feel that we're not clear, is that also?
It certainly is. Thank you. That's a really good question. When you feel like you're not clear, when you feel like you're confused, this is ordinary. This is ordinary mind. And this is Tomal Gyi Shepa. But you have to recognize it. You can't just think of the concept that this is ordinary or think of what Sokuzan said that this is ordinary. You have to actually see that, the texture of that. Very good. Thank you so much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our red chant books. I'd like to remind everybody that this Saturday is our all day, the end of the month all day. Please join us if you can, from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. Also, we have donation boxes that are in the hall. We need and appreciate your financial support. We also accept PayPal and debit and credit cards.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiyo san ji shiku, shison busa moko sa, moko actions, the three worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.